juntar, senhoras e senhores. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're here live with the Brazilian bad guy himself, Raphael Grassetti. Fresh off the foothills of another stellar performance on the main screen, in the green screen hangar here, rather, at the Noman School of Visual Effects. I have the dubious honor of sitting after the demo with a very talented young man from the South American Isthmus.
Yep.
We won't talk about soccer.
Please don't.
Please don't, he says. That's fantastic. So we'll stick to the subject at hand. You have a tremendous following, first and foremost. I'm also a fan. I think it's great work. So thanks for the continued contributions.
Thank you.
Well done. You're originally from Brazil. You're brasileiro. What can you tell us about growing up in Brazil and being exposed to the culture of America and American sort of film?
I think, Brazil has a huge fan base in the computer graphics. So it was a big thing for me just growing up, watching those movies that everybody just loves. And I think we have a lot of our own culture stuff, but we praise a lot of the outside culture as well. So we grew up with the same, sharing culture with America, North America and all that stuff.
Cool. In that vein, people may not realize this, but there are probably some domestic programs and things that you grew up watching that we probably have never seen. I myself am foreign. I'm from Canada.
Yes.
Most people know from Toronto. That's a shout out. Hey, Paul, we're...
Actually, we have a big Mexican influence.
Okay.
So it's same as here.
Wow,
so
interesting.
A lot of Mexican TV shows from here that actually I watched it when I was growing up. We have a lot of also different stuff, but you'll be surprised how
like Los Luchadores kind of things, you know.
Yeah.
There was one I actually, my wife coincidentally does the makeup for Lucha Vavoom. Mm-hmm. If you haven't heard of Lucha Vavoom, it's an extraordinary experience. Solomon is smiling behind the camera, laughing about the Mexican masked wrestling here that happens in Los Angeles from time to time. What I meant to get to was, there was, before they put the show on, they have this guy in a mask that he's wearing a suit, and he's like a superhero. Have you ever seen that kind of programming, or are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
You might know who I'm talking about, yeah.
Los Lutadores. It's
so
all
this
the
is a part
same,
of
you'll
it.
be surprised.
Interesting.
We copy everything from here.
The highest form of appreciation is
for sure.
is copying something.
You can put it that way.
Yeah. People don't also realize that there is a part of you that is traditionally based as a sculptor. Before all the digital jazz, you have a tremendous capacity. I think it's fair to speak that way about it. If people take a minute to look, they'll find that there's a traditional artist buried there. Tell us about that, and how did you get started in that vein?
Well, I have a lot to thank to Alex Oliver. You guys probably know him.
Actually, I was with him last week. He came by the office.
Yeah, he was here.
Yeah.
And he actually brought a lot of that stuff to São Paulo and introduced a lot of people to that technique.
Okay.
And when he started teaching, I actually was one of his students, and I pick up traditional and digital at the same time. And
interesting.
Both things kind of work together and work as in my favor. So I still keep doing it. I do a lot of at work, actually, and people just love to see it. So
yeah, it's really great.
It's just being able to hold the piece or having someone look at your piece in your desk before you actually bring it to the computer is something that not a lot of people can do, and everybody appreciates to see that. So I always try to keep pushing myself. Even though I'm mainly a digital artist, I still try to push myself to always be making something and learning new techniques.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you have achieved some level of critical acclaim. You have a lot of fans and followers around the world that...
I think it's because I've been doing this for a
some
long time, just putting the stuff out there for...
Well, don't take anything away from the quality, because the quality is good.
Right. Thank you.
Eh, boy. We throw our little tidbits of Portuguese in for the people at home in Brazil who are watching and very proud at this moment, I'm sure. So, but I think there's a complexity to that you're capturing when you talk about making these, let's say, sculptures in clay at work. Tell us a little. Let's go deeper into that subject for a moment.
It's something that I have always tried to bring it with me when I'm inside of a studio, even though it's not on the pipeline or in the schedule or anything. I always try, since I know how people appreciate to see that and how it just helps me to be more motivated at work. I always try to bring that with me and just keep making it.
How do your coworkers react to that kind of thing? Some of them having been driven by sort of digital careers.
Everybody loves it. So even, especially if you're a character artist, you probably had that in school at some point, but you actually didn't continue to work on it. So when people see it, especially character artists, they always want to join me and
Cool.
try it and learn, because we all can learn something from it. Especially like digital artists, we can all learn something from traditional, like the old school guys, because they've been doing this for
Right.
way more time.
We've been hearing that too all weekend long. Day one was chock full of that kind of information as well, and day two seems to be going about the same thing. I think there's a running theme that is tying us all together, is that there's first primarily the intention to hold something, that we've arrived at a place where now we're interested in that, and there's technology available to make this happen. But secondly, that it gives us an opportunity by holding and touching something physically that we're looking at it and we're able to correct or look at things in a way that are different.
And even though we have all the technology, we still need the traditional mindset, and like there's just a lot of cleanup work that you have to know what's going to come off from the printer. So by having that traditional background and experience, you kind of
set the stage for, prepare for a movement.
You can prepare and be more intelligent in the way you make stuff. So
more informed, I guess, decisions.
And that kind of technology is just bringing everybody together. So we have to just embrace it and learn as much as we can from it.
I'm happy to hear that your coworkers as well are taking to this and saying, hey, this guy's doing something interesting, let's join in. You get that sort of, this is like a backwards progression where it's actually coming full circle, which is quite interesting too.
Like, there's not a lot of studios that had the sculpture inside of it. I'm talking about game studios.
Right.
It's not about a lot of game studios that have the sculptor inside. Most of the times they have to outsource it and then to look at it. So just by having some of that inside of the studio, just make everybody so excited about the project. And you can see that when people walk by my desk and everybody's impressed and it gets motivated.
They get pumped,
just push the project itself.
We veered in a way towards what I think is a natural conversation that deals with holding things and printing things. So it's safe to say that your progression was a very sort of multi-tiered thing that happened in both disciplines. You didn't have a primary experience in one vein and then discovered the other. You kind of walked into both in parallel.
Yes.
And so that maybe serves you in a really great way.
Yeah, for sure. And then it was me, because when I started, I wasn't really going to be a modeler. I started more towards the animation. So I worked as an animator for a while before I started. When I picked up ZBrush and I started to kind of just make my own stuff with ZBrush, then it's when I realized that, because before this sculpture part of me was kind of an aside, because I was trying to become an animator.
Right.
And
Which is very demanding, we know this.
Yes, and then when I discovered ZBrush and discovered that, a lot of stuff can actually, the stuff that I like about clay, I can actually put that on my professional work. Right. And that's that's what I wanted to do. And then everything started to
Interesting. So that was when I did some research on this, I have to confess, that the early days you were spending time working in advertising in Brazil, that was in an animation sort of vein.
A part of it,
A part of this work that you were doing in that advertising work in Brazil was done in animation. I want to talk to you about these experiences in advertising in Brazil, and what can you tell us about that experience, comparatively speaking, compared to America? Yeah.
For me, since it was basically, because I didn't go to school, it was basically my school.
You're self-taught for all intents and purposes.
Yes. From the beginning, I could say that, because when I got the job in a studio, and that was really where I learned all the pipeline and how to rig, animate, UVs, textures, all the pipeline. So that was basically my school were the advertising studios. So, and I'm grateful because I worked with some amazing artists from the beginning. Right. They taught me so much. And so it was a great experience. I know people have, just because of like overtime and working that kind of stuff, people maybe depending on the studio, you don't have the same experience that I had. But it's just very important to put yourself out there and learn as much as you can from those experiences. And then if you want to work with video games, just always aim to that point. And for me, it just worked because I started to build my own portfolio when I had this stable job at a studio. I did that for almost a year and a half. And then when I had enough clients to just do freelance full time, I went and did that. So my experience this 3 years working with advertising was great.
So you have, but at the same time, you said something very important, and I think very sort of telling, is that you were in the background,
Yes.
sharpening your sword for battle in the arena that you wanted to be in, and you were sort of pushing that in the background.
And I was almost dying because I had no sleep.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, you can sleep later. You're a young man.
Just gotta, there are times that you just have to.
Sometimes, yeah. I
yourself
was
in
recently
do it.
finishing a piece, and I stayed awake for several nights just to get it done for the sake of
Yeah.
hitting print. You know, I was like, okay, I'm going to print this, and I'm done with it. And
Yeah.
that's like, as long as there's that finish line, you know, sort of a moment away, you say, okay, I'll crawl. I have a good quote about this. You'll have to remind me to tell it to you. I'm going to spare the people at home, so I don't want to butcher it either. But it's sometimes worth it to crawl past the finish line.
Yeah,
What are the marketable differences in content and the distribution or representation of a narrative standpoint in an advertising sense between the Brazilian market and the American market when dealing with commercial goods or brands or products?
Well, I can maybe talk just by the game versus
from your experience.
advertising, because since I moved to outside of Brazil, I just work with games full time.
Okay, so you haven't done any advertising here?
No, I haven't
Just
done
strictly
any.
games?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, I can say that it's really different. It's a different pipeline because when you work with advertising, you got a lot of projects
Right.
going on at the
And
same
they're very
time.
fast is what we're
very
hearing.
fast. Not a lot of time to put on the development side of it. So the tools are all kind of always the same. Everything is in there. And when you work for a video game company, there's just a lot of time with just pre-production and development before we start making stuff. So there's a lot of work in the engine, a lot of work in just like creating new tools for the future games. And that stuff is just sometimes not that exciting, but the
Right.
final product, in my opinion, and that's why I work with games, just seeing your characters. Also another thing, like in advertising and movies and that kind of stuff, you're probably not gonna see your character in the screen for too long.
Yeah.
And being
It's very
working with the
short-lived.
games, yeah, your character, it's always gonna be there. If you
Right.
wanna play with them anytime, you
Yeah.
can just turn on your PS4.
You can just walk
just-
around and
and just-
sort of
yeah.
say, hey, there he is. You can
And just by imagining how many like people get attached to your character,
Yeah.
it's something that really like motivates me, and like it's something that So I would say it's kind of the same when you put like work is just work. You have to do stuff that
Right.
you're told to, but just having that feedback and then being able to work on the same thing and see it grow on it's different from in the video games. It's different from advertising.
Sweet. Okay, that's an interesting perspective, and I think it's pretty telling, the situation. Moving forward, who are you, and that kind of brings me to this idea, like where you would draw inspiration initially. You know, you're working in these different environments and you've had this different experience. But what or who would you say would be like inspirations, early inspirations and newfound inspirations? Because I'm sure in Brazil you were driven by some other work that you'd seen. What are some of the earliest inspirations?
I think like everybody on this industry, the early inspirations was more like the movies, like Jurassic Park,
Right.
Predator,
I really like
Aliens,
Predator,
all
by
this
the
stuff.
way.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe
Big
we can
fan.
break and talk for a second
Just-
about this.
yeah.
We watch this once a year at my house during Christmas holidays. It's
Don't
really
go to my house, you just,
right?
just see Predators on the walls.
You would do well at Christmas at my place. So what we do is I typically, over the past few years, I get to go home at Christmas and say hey to everybody. And my sisters, they have this Predator lined up for me to watch with them. They say, we're going to watch Predator. I say, yeah, again and again. I think there's an endearing quality to that film.
Yeah, every time it's on TV.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's very, very early inspirations. And then when I start working on it, just the community itself is
Right.
a big inspiration for me. Like just by seeing what everybody's putting out there,
Right.
just keep pushing me to do more.
Okay.
And not on the sense of competing, but just trying to improve, like knowing what I could do and what people have been doing.
Right. That's also been a running theme where the idea of this idea, you look at something and you say, oh, we've talked about this yesterday with some people who say, oh, I look at that and I think, I'm not intimidated by it. I'm actually inspired by it. And I'd like to see if I can arrive at a conclusion that is in my own voice
Yeah, that's it.
at the same level.
Mhm.
So I think there's a tremendous camaraderie, and we were talking about that
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
And
I'll say now, I still my inspirations are that, and just the co-workers and the people that I'm having the pleasure to work with,
Yeah.
even like freelance or at the studio. It's just something that really motivates me, and just by seeing again what people are doing, like their own IPs and like statue lines, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's actually like doable now with the technology. It's want to do so much and like so.
Well, we'll interject
lot of
with
time.
technology on that one. Yeah, you want to do so much, and there's
Yeah.
never enough of this stuff.
Yep.
See, I don't even wear a watch anymore. That's how much of it I don't have.
I would just go nuts if
Right.
I move my watch. I won't.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, Solomon. So the thing is that I think that that's important because it sets the stage for you have like these pieces of work that you look at and you're like, oh, that's just so great. And you think, sculpturally though, traditional sculpture-wise, or in the traditional vein rather, where did you draw inspiration for that? Because that's like there's this long storied history. You mentioned Alex, Oliver. You must have been sort of pounded with traditional sort of examples
At the beginning,
in that sort of place.
a lot of classical Greek statues in the beginning and
So
sculptures.
Greco and Roman.
Yeah. But I guess I just kind of went away from that after maybe a couple years.
Right.
Like right now, what really motivates me is just more like visual effects, makeups, and that.
Like practical effects and
Practical
makeup
effects.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
okay.
yeah, a lot of those guys like Simon Lee,
Right.
Jorducha, all those guys really. I'm very young, guys, so those guys I'm kind of growing watching those guys.
Yeah, Georgia's got a whole series right behind us in that
Yeah,
cabinet
yeah.
over there. There's like a bunch of them.
You know.
He's oftentimes mentioned as an inspiration. He's such an interesting fellow. If you're watching out there, we love it. We think you're a wild man and don't ever change.
Yeah,
I remember the first time I met him was I thought, who is this guy? He's completely off the wall. Don't ever change.
I still need to visit his studio.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if you're watching.
We'll see what we can do to help that happen. Who are your favorite? I guess you're mentioning them. In the traditional sense, if you could pick some, who would you imagine? Maybe like
Probably Stevie Wang.
okay.
It's just a big inspiration.
Yeah.
Like I can see my style being driven by looking at him
right.
and doing. I think pretty much.
I think it's impossible too.
Yes.
It's like
He's everywhere.
This is the thing about art that I'm picking up from everybody that I'm speaking with, and as an artist myself, it's like you look at something, you process something, and a part of that work that you have seen is going to inevitably be a part of what you're trying to compose.
Yeah.
Whether it's music, painting, art, sculpture, drawing, that's for everybody watching at home. Whatever your medium, it doesn't really matter. It matters that you're processing what you're seeing and that you have the energy, and in this case, we're using a particular tool to arrive at a conclusion. But I think there's that.
Yeah, you always put
blend.
your own stuff into it, but you can, it's always that. Like I said in that presentation, just the mental library. It's gonna be there, and you're just gonna put stuff without thinking too much about it.
Which is great because it's like like a jazz riff. You're like, these are the chords they could be for the song, but do re mi sounds like this today, and we'll play it a different way. That's how I think of it.
Yeah, no, for sure.
What are you inspired by these days? What's driving you forward?
Yeah, I would say mostly a lot of statue lines, and what people have been doing, like the Gentle Giant guys. It's just
they gave a pretty stellar
amazing
performance
work,
as well.
Yeah, and also movies and pretty much movies. I think a lot of 80 movies.
From the movies from the 80s?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet deal. Who can complain? They were good times. Gremlins, I cried. My uncle took me to see Gremlins. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I was a little kid. I was like, get me out of here!
It's good. It's good. I'm just like rewatching a lot of 80s. It's just always amazing, very inspirational.
I don't want to forget to mention this. You've got a tremendous, high-quality 1/5 scale Eckershey model.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that project and how that has come to fruition and what it means to you.
Yeah, that's something that I started more thinking about a book than a statue at the beginning, because I just wanted to practice what I've learned through those past 8 years and put it in a way that I can give something easily for people to digest. And then everything kind of went to the direction of statues because of the Form 1, when I won the Form 1 with the Pixologic.
That's right.
So I started making that, and it was also a great process, a great learning curve for me. So now I'm working with a caster here in LA, Christopher, and he's making all the copies for me. So I'm also learning about the process of making a line and a lot of copies from one piece. And the costs and the marketing, everything that goes with it.
So all of the real hard work and behind the scenes, when everyone is saying, "Hey, I want to get a hold of that," they don't realize that there is maybe perhaps all of this sort of this ocean of work that needs to be done before you get a wave. You know.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that people don't actually think when I just want to make a statue and start selling it.
Yeah.
it's just
Well, there's
a
we have
story by itself.
bit
It's
of
a
a
big nightmare.
business
Some
background
ways.
that we can point at and say, well, you learn very quickly that there is a cost of doing business and you have to pay for those things
Yeah.
to get made. It's not that these, unless you do like a pre-order thing where, you know, there's money up front to produce the objects of affection. But
Yeah.
you mentioned something very important, which I again did not want to forget, and I was not going to forget. That's why I started the whole program off calling you the Brazilian bad guy, was because there was a little tussle that went on at the 3D Printer World Expo a little while ago, and you were the El Gran Champion.
Yep.
So that was the prize. You got the Form 1, and out of the Form 1 comes the Eckershey model. Hey, not a bad fix, you know,
Yep.
for doing battle across one day of digital sculpting action.
Pixologic doing everything that the community needs, because I can see from when I was starting, it was very different from what it is right now. Like everything seems to be going down, but now the Pixologic is just putting everything out there. It's amazing for the community.
Appreciate you saying that.
And it was an amazing experience too. Something new that I've never seen before.
It was a thrill to watch too.
Yeah, we all had so much fun.
Yeah.
It was really good.
But there was only one champion, and you're looking at him. I just got the spinning finger of fame in the background. So, muito obrigado. Many thanks. Saludamos todos lá gente, a Brazil, everybody at home in the home country. On behalf of Raphael Grassetti, I'm Louis Tucci for Pixologic here at the Noman School of Visual Effects, the first ever ZBrush Summit. Take it away, Paul, in the main room.